today. So again, thank you so much for joining. This is EDU Endpoint Office Hours. Today is August 1st, not August 1st. But from here on out, I may just call it August 1st because that's way more fun. This is EDU Endpoint Office Hours. We're excited you're here. Welcome back to a new year. Hopefully y'all got a lot of value out of the last year. I think we had a lot of good content shared. So we've got some great things planned for you this year, and we're really excited to have y'all back. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you are not part of the EDU Endpoint Office Hours team inside of Teams, be sure to fill out the form at aka.ms/EDU Endpoint Office Hours. That will actually create a registration into the team directly for you. We'll get you guys added, and then you can post into the community questions team, as well as get updates that we post for new sessions coming out. A lot of times we're sharing like items for feedback. We have a lot of our engineering groups who are constantly looking for feedback, and we want your EDU voice to be heard. So if we see that, like right now, there's a Windows onboarding survey going around, we'd love for EDU to participate in that. So we'll post announcements in there just to kind of keep you guys all up to date. A few things on the call itself. So you all should be muted by default. Typically, Richard, Scott, or I'm Garrett, by the way, if we haven't met yet. We're your hosts. And just as a courtesy, try to stay muted. Use the raise hand feature if you have a question. We try to get to everyone, but also feel free to use the chat. I like that you just put like a Q in front of the question so that we know that it's a question versus a comment. But largely, I think everyone knows how to use Teams. And so, yeah, that's just a few housekeeping things. The last thing is that we get out reminder emails. We will solve the ICS attachment issues that you may have experienced while joining the call, but you should get a weekly or a bi-weekly reminder, usually the day before our session, so that you know what the topics are. And with that, Scott, I don't know if either of you want to go through the updates, or is there anything that I missed as far as housekeeping items?
I'm in the process of getting everyone to join right now. So a lot of folks were in the original meeting, I think.
Oh, they were? Okay.
I think maybe the ICS did make it out to some people.
Okay.
So now if you look at all the people that are temporarily joining the chat.
Yeah. Heck yeah. This is way better. Look at the crowd.
Let's
30.
I'm single-handedly fixing this, Garrett, so
okay.
Let me actually go here too.
Oh my gosh. Look at all these people. Guys, I'm so sorry for the invite confusion. This is the meeting. You want to be in this meeting from here on out.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about the whole no title thing last time. And so that's no title, but this one has the title, so.
Oh, funny. Okay.
So I'm not sure the whole, like, I don't remember where we landed on why it said no title.
So that's what I did. I just joined the no title meeting and there was no one in there. So.
Oh no, plenty of people there. That's where they all came from, I think.
So that's why, if you are joining us, then you know that there was an issue with the previous invite that was sent out, and I think it actually worked, but it didn't work on the admin side. So we were not able to see the chat. We weren't able to add presenters. We weren't able to manage the meeting in the way that we needed to. So I had to send out a new one, and now I'm having attachment issues within Outlook. So sorry for the confusion, but you're all here now. Thanks, Richard, for that. I did record this. I guess that's one piece that I missed, is that every session we do record and we do post it to our YouTube channel. So we will get the series out. We will have probably a new playlist within YouTube of all the sessions for this upcoming year. Yeah, I was not welcome in my own meeting. It was very bizarre. I was like the organizer and I had no access to anything. It was not going to work or sustainable for the rest of the year. So I had to send out a new one. So sorry about that. So welcome. This is EDU Endpoint Office Hours. You're finally in the right spot, and hopefully it'll be a lot smoother going forward. There is, if you aren't part of the team, make sure that you're part of the team. Ping us directly if you need access, or go fill out the form at aka.ms/EDU Endpoint Office Hours. That will get you added to the team. There is a channel in there for all the updates, just the general channel. There is an announcement in there from myself with the ICS attached. So if you need the latest and greatest ICS to get it added to your calendar, go download that one. I will find the link to that post in just a minute and post it in the chat so you can link directly to it. I hope you all had a lovely summer. It's hot in Texas. I think today it's 108. So if you're in Texas or any of the Southwest states, will you? And I'm jealous of everyone else who's not that hot right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's brutal. So welcome back. Hopefully it's going to be a great school year for you all. We do have an extra special session for you today. Richard has put his head down in the sand and he's just been buried in creating some really cool content about what you need to do to prepare your devices for the back to school year, and really looking at all the policies. And he's got some, as always, some great wisdom to share. So there were a ton of blogs and updates over the summer that we're not going to even go through, but we have them linked into the deck. I will post this deck with the session recording in the team channel so that you can access it and you can go visit all those links and kind of figure out what you may have missed over the summer as far as Windows and Intune related content. But with that, Scott, Richard, is there anything that I missed or that you want to add?
No, I would just add on the 15th, we're going to have Carlos Diaz back from our Intune Cat team. He used to be one of our peers on the education sales team. He's going to be talking about the Microsoft Store and the new migration to that. So make plans to be here on August 15th. And then I believe on the 29th is when we have our next meeting. We're going to be talking about Mac OS, Mac management and Intune. And so that's gotten a lot of interest as of late. So especially with a lot of the features that we've released for Mac OS. And so we're going to work to get some individuals here who have some expertise in that and can tell you what you can do if you haven't ever looked at it, or maybe it was a couple of years ago and you're like, yeah, doesn't fit the bill. We'll just stick with what we have. So we're going to have some individuals talk about that. So
yeah, we've had some cool updates.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it back over to Garrett or Richard and take it from there.
Richard, just take it from here. Let's get into the meat of this. This is an extra long session today, so you're in for a special treat. And I'll shut up.
So let me start sharing here. Get Garrett out of the way. And flip this. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. And as Garrett said, sorry about the mix-up with the invites. Either Outlook or Exchange decided to corrupt their ICS file. So some people got the correct one, some people didn't, but you're all here now. So thank you for joining. And so for this session today, what I wanted to do before school started for most of you, and I know some of you guys have summer school, so that's obviously still going on. But as the school year is about to begin, what I wanted to do is kind of go through a session here about what settings we should be looking at applying to our devices, because there's a ton of them. And as I was going through and preparing all of this, I've got hundreds. I think it's up to about 100, 150 settings that I've documented here. And so we're going to go through and look at what we should be setting when we're managing Windows devices as we prepare for the 2023-2024 school year. And so what we're going to cover is really the lessons that have been learned over the past few years. And you're going to notice that there's this little red icon that keeps kind of showing up, the laser pointer icon. I have no idea what causes that. It's happened in a number of my presentations. It only happens on a few slides. I still have not figured out exactly where that's coming from.
Oh, so I can help you with that, Richard.
Do you know where that comes from?
I do. I can help you.
Okay.
It's the one thing I can actually help you with.
Yeah, because I have no idea like where it comes from, where it's actually It just
I got
randomly
you.
goes up, and I have no idea. And I thought because I have like I have a pen. I've got a Wacom tablet that I use for like drawing stuff, and that's not even connected. So I had like zero clue where the heck it comes from. It's only on certain slides. So anyway, so what we're going to cover today is our lessons learned around a number of different topics over the last few years. Really, it's probably just over the last 6 years, I guess. But we're going to talk about device identity. I know a lot of you guys are already using Intune today, and so a lot of this is just going to be a refresh. Or if you've seen me present at either this venue or at other conferences around the country, I've talked a lot about device identity. So I'm going to rehash some of that. Talk about enrollment and how I've changed how I prefer to enroll devices. Used to be a really big proponent of provisioning packages. I've now changed over to Autopilot. I'm going to explain why later on. We're going to talk about handling the primary user, how important this is. As we've gotten rid of the store for business and store for education, the only way to self-service applications in Intune is through the company portal. But you might be having problems with the company portal, given the primary user and who is associated with the device as that primary user and how it's causing issues with the company portal. So we're going to talk about how to handle this and why it's important. We're then going to go through device configuration profiles. I'm going to specifically talk about device and student. I'm not going to talk about shared, even though it's on the slide. Shared configurations, I'm working on documenting these, but this is going to take a little bit longer. I also plan on getting kiosk completely documented as well, because kiosk isn't as straightforward as you might think. And so we'll definitely have some more guidance on that, but it's going to take some time to get that written up. BitLocker is a big one too. As I was preparing this, I actually had a couple of customers that said, hey, how do I configure BitLocker? And if you go to our docs, it's kind of confusing how to go through and configure BitLocker silently. So we'll go through the exact settings that you need to do for that. Applications, I'm not going to spend a lot of time today talking about the new store app type. Carlos Diaz next week will talk about this in our session that we're going to go over on the migration from the store for business and education over to the new store app type. So we'll save that for that week. But then also removing built-in apps. We're going to talk about exactly how to remove the built-in apps. There's different ways on doing it. I do it through scripts, and so I'm going to provide you with a script on how to do that. At the end, if we have time, I'll talk about Windows updates. And I don't know who's moving is that you, Garrett? Are you moving the pointer? Not sure who's doing that.
No one's doing anything.
Are you seeing the pointer move?
Yeah.
Okay, no clue where that's coming from. It's super weird. So what this session is now, we will not cover Intune 101. Intune 101 can be looked at in these 4 sessions down here. Garrett and one of our teammates actually did this. Did these sessions through an organization called OETC. And so there's like 90 minutes, I think it's like 90 minutes for each of these sessions. And so go check those out. This will get you Intune 101. Garrett and Tyler did a great job on that. Okay, so now let's get out of PowerPoint. And we're going to look at a device demo here. And so I recorded a Surface Laptop Go 2 because the Laptop Go 2 is a pretty popular device for us this summer. Garrett and I have worked through a number of customers in the West and Midwest this year. I think in total, we probably had about 50,000 devices through a number of different customers that we had deployed Laptop Go 2s with. And we primarily did this through Autopilot using self-deploying profiles. And so the reason I've recorded this as a video as opposed to just doing this through a VM is primarily due to Autopilot self-deploying. We can't actually showcase that through a virtual machine because of TPM attestation. We can't actually do a TPM attestation through a VM. We can only do it through a physical device. And so we're going to walk through just what this looks like here in this video. Now with this device, again, Surface Laptop Go 2, apologies for the flickering here. This is going to stop here in a second. But what this is doing is it's a Laptop Go 2 hooked up directly to Ethernet. So there's a Surface dongle that's used. You don't actually have to Ethernet these. You could do this over wireless as well. But Ethernet, when you're trying to do thousands of devices all at once, you're probably going to want to jack them into Ethernet. And so what we're doing here is we're just going through the enrollment status page during Autopilot, and it's going to join the device into Intune. And so if you've done Autopilot, this is all, this is all something you're used to. There's nothing new or nothing special here. But as we go through this with self-deploying, what you'll notice is that we didn't get prompted for a username or password to sign in. We just leveraged the TPM and the TPM attestation on the device to enroll it into the tenant. And then once that is completed, which is the first phase, the device preparation phase, the second phase is device setup. And so this is where our Intune policies are being applied, as well as any applications that have been deployed. And so now that the device has went through both device prep and device setup, we'll now just go to the logon screen, and we'll go ahead and sign in. And so as we get to the logon screen, I'm going to sign in here. Just type in my student credentials. So I'm signing in as a student, so there's no admin rights here. This is a standard user account. And so once the sign-in completes, then we're actually going to flip from the physical machine to a virtual machine. And the virtual machine is a lot easier to see instead of the laptop screen. Otherwise, you see my hands and you see me typing, and it just gets kind of awkward. And so what you're going to notice here is that OneDrive is going to be pre-configured using silent config, known folder move. And so all that stuff's going to be configured. But what you're also going to notice on this machine is that all the built-in Windows apps are gone. We've removed those through a custom script. You could also remove the apps using the new store app type and do a bunch of uninstalls, but that creates a long list of apps in your Intune app list. So in File Explorer, we see that OneDrive has been configured. We've got the cloud icons showing that it actually has been configured. If you click into documents, we'll see that our documents are already there. And then when we open up the company portal app, so the company portal app's been deployed through Intune. When we open up the company portal app, what we'll also notice is that we can self-service our applications. But when you look at this screen, notice at the bottom where it says this device is shared. It's shared because it's a machine that has been enrolled through Autopilot self-deploying. And through self-deploying, it actually does a shared or a bulk enrollment. And so in this case, I'm able to use the company portal, no primary user assigned. I can easily install and self-service applications directly from the company portal. And so you'll see that I installed Acrobat Reader. We can go ahead and open that up, and it works just fine. But now, if we go into settings, we'll also then see all the different applications. We'll see the different settings that have been applied to the machine. So we'll see that all of our policies have already been applied. It's all been fairly quick, but you'll notice there's a ton of settings here. And we're going to go through all the settings here in a minute. But next, what we want to do is open up Edge. And when we open up Edge, which will take a second here before it gets there. There we go. When we open up Edge, we'll notice that Edge has been single signed on. We don't have the first run experience. We're opening up directly to office.com, and we have SSO directly into Office. But I'm going to go to Discord, and I'm going to go start downloading things that students typically want to download on their machines. And we're going to show that on this device that students can't install things that they download directly from the internet. And so with Discord, if I go ahead and just double click Discord and try to run it, what you'll find is that you're going to get a message here that says that you're trying to install an app that's not verified by Microsoft. And that in order to install apps, you need to actually do it from the store. Well, if we click on the store, that's actually going to be blocked because we actually have a policy here set to require the private store only. But the private store doesn't exist anymore because we got rid of the store for business, we got rid of the store for education. So when you set that policy now, the store is blocked. And so in this scenario, I can't run and install Discord. But what students would do, what they could do is there's a policy that you can set that, actually let me pause this before it goes too far ahead. Pause. So if we go back to that window, where's it right here? So we go here. If you download a file from the internet that's not trusted, there's typically an unblock checkbox that you can just unblock the file and then allow it to run. And so if you were to set the policies here that I'm using, we're actually using smart screen policies. And if you set those policies, what you would find is that you would get the same message, but if you right-clicked on the file, there'd be an unblock option below the read-only and the hidden checkboxes on the properties of the file. And so there's an additional policy that you can set. It's kind of buried. It's not even really within settings catalog. It's an administrative template that's in settings catalog, but it's not a native. There isn't like a native CSP for it. But we can actually remove that unblock option to prevent anyone from actually installing these applications or getting around the smart screen technology. And so if we continue through here, another common app that students like to run to get past our content filters is Siphon. So with Siphon, we're going to go through and try to download. And it's going to be the exact same experience like with Discord. We aren't actually able to run the app because Smart Screen is actually blocking it. And so as we go through that, get the same experience, try to go to the store, and it's going to be blocked. And so you can do this with Firefox, with any third-party browsers. A lot of you guys complained to us about, hey, students are installing browsers, and those browsers are getting around the UAC prompt. Because when you install something like Firefox or Chrome, it's going to try to install the program files first. And if you don't have admin rights, it's going to prompt you to say, hey, type in admin rights. And if you hit cancel, then it just bypasses that and just starts to install things to the app data folder within your local profile. And so with Smart Screen, we prevent that as well. And so we'll go through exactly how to set those policies here in a minute. But now let's get back to our slides. Now, many of you have been using Intune, so I don't need to spend a lot of time here, but just know that if you've never used Intune, it's the first time you're hearing us talk about it. Intune MDM platform can manage pretty much all the popular operating systems that are out there: Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, Linux. I say manage in Linux, not a lot of management there, but we're working on it. Now, from a device identity perspective, so if you watch any of my presentations before on device management, I typically use this slide to talk about device identity, Azure Active Directory joining versus hybrid Azure Active Directory joining, and which to choose. In this slide, there's a link here to a webinar that I recorded that goes fairly deep into this exact topic. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here going over these. So I'm going to actually just kind of walk, kind of step through this. What I do actually want to focus on here is, well, actually, no. Go watch that session because it's the exact same content. So I'll just kind of skip over this. Device enrollment. I've got some screenshots in here. If you've never done hybrid join before, I've taken explicit screenshots of exactly how to set it up with Azure AD Connect. So you can walk through these slides. You can look through the screenshots. Pretty easy. At the end of the day, when you're done with it, you should start to see devices in your tenant that show up that say join type of hybrid Azure AD join. If you see stuff like this, you're in a good spot. And now if you're using group policy with configuration, if you're using group policy enrollment, not using config manager, then I also have the screenshots here for you to follow along to set up Intune to get those devices to enroll into Intune after hybrid Azure AD join is complete. And so in here, this goes through the group policy config, what exactly you need to do for that. And then if you're doing config manager, then there's some screenshots here for that too. And then all the docs that go along with that. Okay, so let's talk about device enrollment. So there's really two types. We have three boxes here, but in reality, there's two because the two on the right are pretty much the same kind of idea. So on the left-hand side, for a brand new device that we're enrolling into a tenant, the recommended way to do this is to pre-register those devices with Windows Autopilot. We're going to talk here in a minute about the different Autopilot deployment types, but that's the recommended way that we have today. In the middle, we have this simple IT-driven concept using a tool called Windows Configuration Designer. You can go and download Windows Configuration Designer from the Microsoft Store. Open up your Microsoft Store app, do a search for Windows Configuration Designer. It will install, that application will be installed on your machine, and that will create provisioning packages. And a provisioning package, it's a file that has a .ppkg file extension. That package is used to enroll a device either to Azure Active Directory. It can do a domain join if you want, or it can do neither of those, and just the machine can be a workgroup machine. But that tool is used primarily to get devices bulk enrolled. So if you had hundreds or thousands of machines that you needed to prepare, you can use a provisioning package to get those devices enrolled. Very similar to what I showed with Autopilot self-deploying. Windows Configuration Designer, those provisioning packages will enroll the device in the exact same type of way. And then lastly, on the right-hand side here, we have teacher-driven using an application called Setup School PCs. This is more, we say teacher-driven. I don't know how many teachers have actually done this. Maybe some are out there. I haven't worked with any that have actually done it, but you can use Setup School PCs to generate a provisioning package, much like Windows Configuration Designer. However, there are pre-configured school-specific customizations that have been built into that tool. So it's a very locked down, customized package that has already been made for you by us. And it's very difficult for you to make modifications to those packages without taking the package that it generates and then going into Windows Configuration Designer, importing that package, and then customizing whatever it created. So it walks you through a wizard, creates some settings, but there's also some things that you just can't modify natively with Setup School PCs that you would have to go and do through Configuration Designer. So by and large, what most customers that my team works with, what they generally do is either they'll use Autopilot or they'll use Windows Configuration Designer. Very few will actually use Setup School PCs. So now Autopilot. I know a lot of you guys have already been doing Autopilot, so this should be all fairly typical for most of you. But if you've never worked with Autopilot, just to kind of get everyone at the same level, I am actually using the laser pointer here, by the way. So how Autopilot works is that your hardware vendor, you're going to buy devices. Let's say you buy 1,000 devices from Dell, or you buy 1,000 devices from us that are Surface. You buy those devices and you tell them, hey, I want the device to be enrolled into Autopilot. Like, great. Okay, so then they will take those device IDs and they will enroll them into the Windows Autopilot service. Now, this is a separate service in the cloud. It's not Intune. It's in the Intune console. You will configure it in Intune, but Windows Autopilot is actually a completely separate cloud service. And so you'll enroll those devices, or your OEM or your device partner will enroll those devices into the Autopilot cloud. And then Autopilot will synchronize into your Intune environment. And so you'll start to see a bunch of devices synchronize into Intune. And then you, as the IT admin, will generate what's called a Windows Autopilot profile. That Autopilot profile will have a number of settings in it that basically bypasses the out-of-box experience. When you create that profile, that gets synchronized over to the Autopilot service. So now your devices are in the Autopilot service, and your Autopilot profile or profiles, you can have multiple profiles, those will be in the Autopilot service. Next, when the hardware vendor decides to ship the devices, this could actually happen weeks after the devices have already been uploaded to Autopilot. So you could see a bunch of IDs and you can see a bunch of things already in Intune that your OEM or your partner has uploaded, but the devices may not ship for weeks. But once they eventually ship, you have a choice of where they ship to. They can go directly to the employee. They can go to your IT department. Wherever you want those devices to go, they'll end up. And then when you turn them on, when you unbox them, you turn them on, they connect to the internet for the first time. They're going to go to the Autopilot service and they're going to download the Autopilot profile that you created over here. When that profile gets downloaded, that's how we determine what to show during the out-of-box experience. So in my example, I created an Autopilot self-deploying profile. And so it knew, okay, don't show them the logon screen. We don't want them to log into the machine. We're going to use this Autopilot self-deploying, so we're going to use the TPM of the device. We're going to test that to validate the security of the device to allow that device to actually enroll. And so when I created that profile, when I turned the device on, I downloaded that profile, and then I went through that experience. Now, if you've never done Autopilot before and it's your first time hearing about it, lots of docs down here at the bottom on how to go through and learn more about it. Get out of the pointer. Okay. So let's talk about scenarios for Autopilot. So the most common Autopilot scenario that most customers use is user-driven mode with Azure AD join. So what this basically does is it joins the device to Azure AD. and then it enrolls the machine into Intune. And when you make that when you do that enrollment, we're making a connection between the device and the user that is using or that is signing in with their credentials during the out-of-box experience. That user becomes the primary user of the device. They're the ones that are enrolling through the out-of-box experience. And so that user is the only one that can use the company portal for self-service application installs and BitLocker key recovery. And this is important to understand as we get through this, because a lot of you may have been using Autopilot, and you've probably found that primary users are not the actual users of the device. Could be your IT department, could be someone that originally did Autopilot, and now we're in year 2 or year 3 or year 4 of the device, and the device has changed hands multiple times. You haven't ever re-imaged it, and so the primary user is not the same user. And in those situations, the company portal does not work for self-service application installs. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. Self-deploying mode. Now, this is, I put in bold here, recommended. This is the method that I recommend now. As of Windows 11, the latest builds of Windows 11 today typically have removed a lot of the problems that we had with Autopilot self-deploying as it pertains to TPM at a station. We still see some instances where some devices may have some TPM problems, but a lot of those problems have gone away. So for a long time, I didn't recommend self-deploying mode because of TPM issues. I would recommend provisioning packages even over user-driven mode for Autopilot, because with provisioning packages, when you use a provisioning package or when you use Autopilot self-deploying mode, first of all, there's no need to provide credentials during UBI. The device just automatically enrolls through either the provisioning package or through Autopilot self-deploying mode. It's automatically joining Azure AD and it's automatically getting into Intune, as you saw in the video that I showed earlier. But in this scenario, there is no primary user associated with the device. So all users can use the company portal for self-service application installs, and that's key, especially in an education environment where you have shared devices or you have multiple users that are using a device, maybe not in one school year, but maybe throughout the lifetime of that device. If you've never planned to re-image a device and you've got, it's one-to-one this year, you collect them at the end of the year and then you give devices out to other students, but you're not re-imaging them. To me, those are still shared devices. Even though they're one-to-one through the school year, if you're never re-imaging them, you shared them. It just took you a year or 9 months to share that device out to the next person. And so in these situations, any user can use the company portal for self-service apps. So this is great for those shared EDU scenarios with carts, labs, or even that one-to-one or one-to-many scenario that I was just describing. The downside to this, though, and it may not even be that big of a downside, is that the user cannot self-service BitLocker recovery key. And so if you go to myaccount.microsoft.com, you can see all of the devices that have been enrolled using your user identity. And you can also see all the BitLocker recovery keys for all of those devices. And so if you are using a device that has been enrolled through self-deploying mode or through a provisioning package, you won't see those devices because those are shared devices. There's no primary user associated with them. And so if you can't get your BitLocker recovery key, you'll need to call the help desk. Well, in general, I think in most environments, the help desk is called when a BitLocker recovery key is needed anyway. So this is probably not that big of a change for you in your typical day-to-day work. Now, the next option for Autopilot is Autopilot pre-provisioning. And so with Autopilot pre-provisioning, this is something we used to call white glove. But your partners or IT staff can pre-provision a Windows PC to be fully configured and business ready for the organization or for the user. And so this effectively is just you or your partner is installing all of the applications or settings that are targeted to the device ahead of time. So imagine going through what I just showed with Autopilot self-deploying mode. Imagine going through all of that and just installing whatever apps have been targeted, whatever settings have been targeted, and then at the end of it, we reseal the device, we box it up, and then we ship it as pretend I'm a partner right now. I'm doing all this work for you, and then I'm shipping you to the device after the fact. Your user then turns the device on, and then they sign in going through the user-driven mode through Azure AD Join. So think of pre-provisioning. Think of this as a combination of this and this. We kind of merge both of these into one offering of Autopilot. So we do all of the device-specific things, like with self-deploying mode, we enroll the device without a user account, we install all of your apps and settings, we do all of that, and then we seal the device up, we ship it to you, your user unboxes it, and then goes through this process. And in this process, they become the primary user of the device. Now, there is an issue that we have with device firmware configuration interface, or DFCI, and user sign-in. And Garrett had a customer that was going through this, and this is actually kind of how we found this. We didn't really realize it at the time until we started going through this, started looking at logs, like, oh, DFCI is actually causing a problem, especially with Surface, because all Surface devices actually enroll through they do an enrollment that's what we call a high touch enrollment, and so in the enrollment, what ends up happening is that the device ends up, I'm sorry, it's a high trust, not high touch. In the high trust enrollment, even if you have no DFCI configuration whatsoever targeted to the machine, we still do that high trust enrollment. And when we do that enrollment, it actually causes a reboot of the machine. And so that reboot occurs during enrollment. And then so what happens is that the student will sign in during UBI, go through, they get hit with that reboot, and then they have to sign in again at the logon screen. So you end up with a double sign-in going through this DFCI configuration, even if you're not turning on DFCI. And so right now we're seeing this primarily on Surface, because Surface is the largest vendor that supports DFCI. We do have other vendors as well, but not as many. We don't have as many of those types of devices that are being enrolled. So it's like the HPs and Dells right now they actually don't support DFCI. And so they don't do the high trust enrollment like we do with Surface. So if you've got Surface devices and you're noticing, hey, why am I getting this random reboot if we go through Autopilot pre-provisioning? It's because of this high trust enrollment that happens for DFCI. Again, even if you don't deploy a DFCI policy, you still are high trust enrolled. And then lastly, user-driven mode with hybrid Azure AD join. We do not recommend you do this. A lot of you are doing it, and I know because I get the logs when it breaks. And so a lot of customers are going through this, and it's complicated to set up, and it also takes a while. And so this is something that generally IT is going to handle the deployment of. You typically handle the deployment of most of this stuff. But when it comes to hybrid Azure AD join through Autopilot, you really want to make sure that you're handholding this because it can take a while for the devices to enroll, because they got to join your domain. We have to synchronize between Azure AD Connect up to Azure AD, and we just need to make sure that whole end-to-end process works. And oftentimes we see failures. There could be a number of reasons why you have a failure. It's not any one thing. And so troubleshooting this becomes somewhat challenging, hence why our team seems to get the log files from a lot of you guys that have issues with it. So what I recommend is start looking at self-deploying mode for Azure AD join. If you had problems with this in the past because of TPM attestation issues, try it on the latest Windows 11 builds. So if you're getting new devices today that are coming from, if they come from Surface, if they come from us for Laptop Go 2, for instance, they're actually shipping with the RTM of Windows 11 22H2, I believe, or it could be 2021H2. I can't remember exactly. But those builds actually did have problems with TPM attestation. We did fix that, I think, in like the September cumulative update for 22H2 for Windows 11. That's why I'm saying the latest builds as of now seem to be great. So if you're using FFUs to reimage machines, you should be on the latest builds of Windows. Self-deploying mode should work just fine. And so as we get into the fall timeframe, I would imagine that we should start to see any new devices that are produced. Hopefully, we'll have all the TPM fixes in that came like last September's cumulative update. I'm hoping that most of those newer devices ship with those fixes. If they don't, you can reimage with FFUs, and Windows 11 should have all the fixes that you need if you're using the updated FFUs. Okay, the primary user. So I've already kind of touched on this. Just keep going through it. So with the primary user, it restricts who can do certain things on the device. And I talked about these things earlier. Self-service application installs for apps that are made available. So when you create an app in Intune and you deploy it out to a group of users, you're making that application available. You're not making it required. You're just targeting it to a group of users and saying, hey, install this app. If you ever need it, go to the company portal, go ahead and install it. The primary user of a device is able to do that. If there's a primary user associated with the device, they're the ones that are able to do that. They can also do self-service BitLocker recovery key, as I mentioned earlier, going to myaccount.microsoft.com. And then there are other self-service remote actions that they can do via the My Account portal. There's actually a reset, a rename, a retire. So they have some self-service things that they can do on their own that you might not be aware of. I don't know that many people are even aware of the myaccount.microsoft.com site. So if you've never been there, go ahead and open it up and see all the fun stuff that you're able to do on your own devices. And again, the primary user is the only one that can do these things. If a secondary user signs into a machine, they cannot do the BitLocker recovery key. They cannot do the self-service application installs. Those things are not available to them. And something that gets confused sometimes is that the primary user is not the same as the last logged on user. And so oftentimes, what we'll find is that an IT admin or someone will come to us and say, hey, we need the primary user on this device. And we'll ask why. Well, we need to know who to contact if there's something wrong with the device. Well, just because you have a primary user doesn't mean it's the last logged on user. Like, what if a device was stolen? If the device was stolen, someone could have signed into it that's not the primary user, and the last logged on user is probably the one that you want to find. But Intune doesn't actually show you the last logged on user, at least not the full Intune now Intune for Education has a report that actually shows you the last logged on user. So you can see that over there. Now, often what we typically see is that the primary user is actually an IT admin, especially if you're in a hybrid join environment. If you go look at all your hybrid Azure AD join machines, you're probably going to see an IT admin is the one that is the primary user. Not all the time. If you turned on hybrid join, like, well, most people do it like in the middle of a school year or whatever. And so in those situations, you'll probably see that just the actual user of the device might actually be the primary user. But as your IT department starts to go through and gets new devices in, they reimage things, over time, the primary user is probably going to be an IT admin because they're going to get the device ready, they're going to sign in, they're going to validate things are working, they might install some apps. And so because they're the first one to sign in as they're prepping that device, they end up as the primary user. And in that situation, you have the problems that I mentioned earlier. And so here's a screenshot here of just a virtual machine I have. And so the primary user, if you have no idea what I'm talking about or where this is, go look at just a device object in Intune on the right-hand side. You'll see that it says primary user. And in my example here, I've got my primary user, the user account is actually student, and it's enrolled by student. So the person that enrolled it and the primary user is the same person. However, you can manually click into that link that says student for primary user. I can click on that and I can change the primary user. I can go and set it to whoever I want. And so the enrolled by user would still be student, but the primary user would be whoever I select. Now, should I configure the primary user? So again, I mentioned that it's pretty limiting in many scenarios, and most people want the primary user in order to identify who the device actually belongs to. But again, if you really want this, then it's highly recommended that you only use enrollment methods that configure the primary user for one-to-one devices that will be one-to-one for the life of the device. Because if, like, think of your faculty and staff scenarios, like your faculty and staff they'll probably be one-to-one, and they'll probably be the only user to use that device. Not always, but in most cases that might be true. And so in order to get the primary user associated with that device, you want to use enrollment methods like Autopilot user-driven, as I mentioned earlier, or Autopilot pre-provisioning. Both of those scenarios will have a primary user associated with the device. If you go through Ubi, when you go through Ubi, there's an option that asks you who owns this device. So if we're not using Autopilot, let's take Autopilot out of the picture, and just imagine you got a laptop from Best Buy or some retailer. You take the device out of the box, you go through the out-of-box experience in Windows, there's going to be a screen in there that's going to ask you who owns this device. you can select my organization owns this device, or this is a personal device. If you select my organization owns this device, that actually does a personal enrollment, but you still get a primary user associated with that device. And then there are any other user-driven methods via Windows OS. There's a ton of them, but if you go through settings and you go to accounts, you can go and specify a work or school account with a device. And in that scenario, the machine can have a primary user associated with it as well. Those bottom two are not recommended ways of enrolling. I'm not suggesting that in any way. Primarily, if you want primary user associated with a device, add enrollment, Autopilot user-driven, and Autopilot pre-provisioning. These are the two that you would want to do. These ones I would avoid if you can, just because they're very manual methods. And well, this one's going to get you a personally enrolled device. It's not corporate owned. And so these ones are just corporate enrollments as opposed to personal enrollment, and personal enrollment for this one as well. Now, for devices that may be shared, so carts, laptops, kiosks, or devices that you won't be re-imaging after the school year and giving to other students, we recommend the following enrollment methods. So Autopilot self-deploying, I mentioned earlier, provisioning packages, either built with Windows Configuration Designer or a set of school PCs. So it's the same thing as I mentioned earlier. Those methods will allow for self-service application installs for any user that signs in. No problems with company portal whatsoever. But the only downside is the lack of self-service BitLocker recovery key support, as I mentioned earlier. So when we go through and look at who is assigned as the primary user, there's a ton of different ways to enroll a machine into Windows. This is every method that we document. And so you can see there's just a ton of them, but we outline who the primary user is in each of these methods. And the two methods that we recommend now, Azure AD Join with a bulk enrollment token through either Windows Configuration Designer or Azure AD Join with Autopilot with a self-deploying mode. Notice here there's no primary user. So these two methods completely unlock the company portal app, and you have no issues with primary users whatsoever. Okay, so how do we change this? Because a lot of you guys are in a situation where the primary users, it's on a machine and company world is broken, or doesn't work. How do we get it to work? And so oftentimes it's our IT admin that's the primary user, not always, but often. And so with the removal of the store for business and education, customers who were using the private store in the Microsoft Store app on Windows devices, they need to use the company portal now. And many IT admins have noticed that the company portal doesn't work because of all this. And so what we've done is we've written a script. And I've already sent the script out to you guys already. I'm just putting it in here just to kind of complete this deck and this concept. But essentially, if you haven't done this yet, what this script is going to do is going to target an Azure AD security group of devices, and it cycles through all of them to modify the primary user. And so what we can do is we can either decide that we want to put the last logged on user as the primary user, or we can just remove the primary user completely and you have no primary user. And when you do that, you effectively get to this, right here, where you're effectively, even though you may not have enrolled it this way, you have no primary user assigned. So the company portal can still work. So we just need to remove the primary user somehow. You don't actually have to set one unless you want, but you really just need to get it off of there or set it to the correct person, and then they could use the company portal app. And so this script will do either of those. Click the link; it takes you to the instructions on how to run it. Okay, so that's primary user. Now let's shift gears here and talk about removing built-in apps. So built-in apps, it's kind of a pain to deal with. If you look on the right-hand side, these are all the applications that we typically need to, you probably don't have to remove all of them, but in general, a lot of them just don't have any education relevance. You might argue that the mixed reality portal, if you're using headsets and stuff like that, that those could have some relevance. But by and large, a lot of the stuff is distractions for students, even faculty and staff members. And so you might just want to remove them. And so what we've been doing is using Intune remediations to clean these up. Again, you could use uninstalls using the new store app type through Intune. If you want to just go and find each of these apps, like go search for your phone and deploy and uninstall, go search for Skype, deploy and uninstall. You could do those. But either way, you'll end up with pretty much the same outcome, whether you use a script or whether you go and find all those apps. So if you want to use the scripts, we'll provide a link to those in the deck. And then removing the built-in apps, once you get the scripts, there's a detection script and a remediation script, and so we'll just go and detect which applications are on the machine. If we just find one of them, we don't have to find all of them, it's just if we find one that is there, then we'll go through and just run the remediation script to remove, and we'll just check to see what else do we find, and we'll just go ahead and remove all the scripts all the apps that are in the list. I plan on keeping that script up to date as long as I can with any new releases of Windows as they come out, because there always seems to be some new app that gets added. Okay, so configuration profiles. Let's talk about these. So I've been working on a doc here that basically goes through and sets, or at least it gives you pretty much every setting that we want, or I say we would be me and my team, that we would typically set in a customer environment, whether we're going through like a pilot, a proof of concept, or just any customer engagement that we're dealing with. These are the settings that we're finding that are the most common for an education environment. Now, this doesn't mean K-12. Higher ed can also take advantage of this. Academic medical center can also take advantage of this. But there are some things in here that would only pertain to K-12. And there's probably also some things in here that you're like, hey, if I'm higher ed, you're telling me to set something that might go against my security requirements. There's no, what we're saying in this guide isn't that that these settings are all inclusive. There's going to be things that are missed, especially from a security standpoint. We might not have everything that's in here. And what I'm strongly suggesting for everyone here is that go through these settings. And if there's something that I have missed or my team has missed, then let us know. When you go here, just open up an issue. You can click on issues, or you can do a pull request if you want to just add it yourself. That's fine too. But we want to collect these settings for everyone. So that way we have a guide that is specific to EDU, because right now, if you went and tried to do this stuff yourself, it's a nightmare. It's taken me a long time to actually document all this stuff out. And as I'm doing it, there's just no possible way that any one person, unless you live and breathe this stuff, there's just no possible way that you would go and actually set everything, correctly. You just wouldn't know where to go. And it's not just in any one place. Like we've got settings catalog, which I basically go through and give you every setting in the settings catalog that we would recommend. And this is, again, it's not all inclusive. We're going to add more to this as more people start to go through it and find things. And so the way that I've broken this down is through settings catalog, and I'm going through like the different profile types. So settings catalog, and then between both device and user settings. So all of this stuff is really settings catalog, but then I break it down based on the other templates. So for BitLocker, we go through and use the endpoint protection template. There's a couple ways to do BitLocker. You might be thinking, hey, why aren't you doing endpoint security disk encryption? If you look at our docs, we actually we tell you to do either or. And what's super confusing in those docs is that we try to basically make both of these templates or both of these processes happy. I don't know if happy is the right word, but we try to give you guidance, like if you're doing it over in endpoint security, do this. If you're doing it over in endpoint protection template, do this. So it's very confusing, and that's why our team gets a lot of questions on this. And so I've given you every single setting for BitLocker to set in this table right here, to make it so that BitLocker is configured silently. So you aren't getting prompts, and the keys are escrowed correctly to Azure AD. And so this is what we found that works. If you're finding issues, again, let us know. But then we go through the Windows Health Monitoring template. This is stuff for endpoint analytics and for Windows Update reports, not Windows Update for business reports, but the reports in Intune for Windows Update. They're two different things. And you may not even know that you need those. So we go through a lot of settings in here. You can tell my scroll bar is getting very, very, very tiny. Because I said it earlier on, there's about 100, 150 settings thereabouts. There's going to be more. I'm actually not completely done with it yet. But what I've also done is I've actually put up a Word doc here. Because lots of people like pictures. And so I've taken pictures of all the different settings. And so there's some screenshots in here of these. I might incorporate them into the doc. I don't know. It's just got to kind of figure formatting stuff out, stuff like that out. But we're going to have all of those settings. Well, right now we have settings in here that have screenshots of things. So we're doing that too. So that's all documented out. I could spend a lot of time going through all of the settings. I'm not. It would take us forever to do all of that. But what I do want to call out are just a few different things. One of those things is something that we've actually had a session on in the past called Microsoft Connected Cache. I would strongly suggest that if you guys haven't yet, sign up for the Connected Cache preview. You can just do a search for Microsoft Connected Cache, or Garrett or someone can post a link in the chat, but sign up for this. We're still taking people in the preview. It works great. I like it a lot. And the reason I would strongly suggest you guys do this is I'm actually going to go into my Azure portal. I'm going to show you some data here real quick. So with Windows Update for Business Reports, which, by the way, I've got to get those settings documented. They're not in there right now, but I'm in the process of getting those in. Within Windows Update for Business Reports, if you haven't set this up yet, also something to set up. Again, I don't have the specific settings in that doc. I'm going to get those documented, though. But within Windows Update for Business Reports, this will obviously tell you all of the, the different update status within the organization, quality updates, feature updates, even driver updates. Although I've got driver updates turned on, I've approved some things. I'm not getting any data in here, so I don't know if this is something that's still being worked on. But what I want to call it is delivery optimization. So I use Microsoft Connected Cache in my environment. I'm not using SCCM with the distribution point. I'm actually using the native Microsoft Connected Cache virtual machine. And so it's delivering content to my devices. And when I look at the data for this, I've got a home lab. I've got it's one physical host. It's got like 128 gigs of RAM in it. But I've got just a bunch of VMs that thing runs. And I was doing some testing on like some old Windows 10 builds the other day. And so I need to get those things upgraded from like 2004 all the way to Windows 11 22H2, and I needed to test some things out. And so as I was doing that, I had to download feature updates, right? And these feature updates, they're not small. They're about 3.5 gigs if you look at the ESD file size. And so downloading that content obviously is going to take some time. But like many of you, you probably have bandwidth caps. So depending on your ISP, you might have like a terabyte cap or something like that. We actually have them here. And so I don't want my bandwidth going over my cap. So I need to use Connected Cache to make it so that my lab is not just going out to the internet and downloading Windows, downloading Office and all the apps and everything else. Like it's a ton of content. And so Connected Cache, I've been testing it for a long time now. And when I look at the content distribution, so if I look at just this column or this row right here, bandwidth savings by percentage, 95% bandwidth savings with delivery optimization. Now this is just DO. It's not just Connected Cache. It's both Connected Cache and peer-to-peer. But when I look at percent from, this is from Microsoft Connected Cache or peer-to-peer. That 95.28%, it's 95.28% from Connected Cache. So 100% of my content is being delivered by Connected Cache. And so the way that this works is that if I've got a machine that needs to download like Windows 11, So I had a VM that I built, Windows 11 or Windows 10 2004. I need to get Windows 11 on that machine. It didn't exist on any of my machines in my environment because they're all imaged with a newer release of Windows 11. So it's not the file that's being delivered from Windows Update. And so because of that, I had to go download that content one time from the internet. And so I had one machine that connected to Windows Update, it downloaded the content, and it sent a copy to the Microsoft Connected Cache server. Then I had another VM that I built that was also running Windows 10 2004, and that machine needed to download the content from the Microsoft Connected Cache environment. And so by doing that, that's how I ended up with this feature update column right here at about 6, because I said that your image for Windows 11 is going to be about 3.5 gigs. And so I had to actually make 2 jumps. I had to go from Windows 10 2004 to Windows 11 RTM. And then I had to go from Windows 11 RTM to Windows 11 22H2. You might be wondering, why couldn't you just go to Windows 11 22H2? I have no idea. I couldn't figure it out. I sat there, I kept hitting the connect or check for updates. I never got Windows 11 22H2 offered from a machine that was sitting on Windows 10 2004. But I was getting, when I changed Intune to target Windows 11 RTM, I was able to get it. And so I had to do a double jump. I had to go to Windows 11 RTM, then Windows 11 22H2. That's why that number is 6.6 gigs. Because I did this on 2 virtual machines. So the first machine got all the content, stored it on Connected Cache. The second virtual machine downloaded the content directly from Connected Cache. And so that's how I'm getting this here. And so for everything else, I've got, this other column, which I think is like Win32 apps, because there's no category for Win32 apps. So my Win32 app content is about 2 gigs or so. Quality updates about 2 gigs. I'm getting about 3 gigs for apps. Apps, these are like Notepad, calculator, anything that's a UWP app that's coming from the store. This is not, these are not your Win32 apps from Intune. And then Office. Actually, on my VMs, I don't have Office on any of my VMs. I've got Office on my service laptop Go 2. Office is there, and so these are just updates for Office, not like the full installation of Office, but just the monthly enterprise channel Office content. And so in here, again, we see all the devices that I have in the environment, how much content's been downloaded, and so. The reason I recommend this isn't so much for saving bandwidth, because a lot of you guys might have good bandwidth deals. Being education customers, you typically get fairly significant discounts on bandwidth. It's not so much that, but speed. Sometimes we don't think too much about how fast content can be delivered to our devices. But if you have the Connected Cache server local to you, and that server is fairly well equipped, you got enough resources for it. That server it should give you the content faster than having to go out to the Microsoft CDN and downloading it from there. And so if you can keep the content internal, then you'll actually speed up your Autopilot deployments. You'll speed up a provisioning package-based deployment that has to go out to Intune to download content. If the content's local, we can find that content faster. And so I bring all this up because in our settings, get back here, there's a section in here on delivery optimization. And so I don't outline the DO settings if you're using peer-to-peer. I'm only outlining the settings or specifying the settings if you're using DO with Connected Cache. And so if you go through this and you're like, wait a minute, I don't have a DO cache host. You don't have a DO cache host because you actually haven't signed up for DO yet. So sign up for DO, go through that, and then these are the settings that I'm using that have been working well in my environment and that have been getting the content from the peer or getting the content from the Microsoft Connected Cache server fairly reliably. Most content that I download, and when I look at machines and how you can tell that this is working, and unfortunately today's August 1st, so the counters in Windows have been reset because it resets every month. But what you can do, I'm going to bring over Hyper-V here. What you can do when you're looking at a machine Where am I? I think I'm just. Yeah, okay. So if you go into settings, and you didn't want to wait for like the Windows Update for Business Reports to refresh, and like, hey, is it even working? Go to Windows Update, go under Advanced Options, and go to Delivery Optimization, and go down to Activity Monitor. Within here, you'll see where your download statistics are coming from. Is the content coming from Microsoft? Is it coming from connected cache or PCs on your local network? So if you're using peer-to-peer, you would see this. But ideally, if you use the settings that I have described in the doc, you should see all of your content, or at least a good majority of it. It's not going to be all. You'll probably see maybe 80%, 85, 90%, hopefully somewhere in that range. You should see most of that content be delivered from your connected cache server. If you're seeing like 90% is coming from Microsoft and nothing's coming from connected cache, then there's a problem somewhere. So that's an easy way to just check without running PowerShell or going to Windows Update for Business Reports. This is just an easy way to look at it. And you'll see this pretty much in real time. So like when I was downloading Windows 11 22H2, I could actually just hit F5, or not really F5, but I'd click out of Delivery Optimization, go back to Activity Monitor, and I'd see the number change. So I can see it in mostly real time. There's some PowerShell commandlets you can also run if you wanted to check that, get more granular detail. But this is a pretty easy way of checking that. All right, what else we got? Some other things to call out. Edge. The settings for Edge to make it so you SSO into Edge, like I showed in that video. All of those are here. There's a ton of Edge settings, as well as to protect students, blocking ads, blocking a bunch of things. We do all of that. There's probably more things that you might set for your students or for your faculty staff members. If there are, let us know. Like I said, open up an issue on the doc. Let me know if there's something that you guys set, because I'd like to collect all those things. And my goal here is to really get this stuff into our main docs and provide a doc that we can set. But then once I have all this stuff set, also be able to export it out to like a JSON file in the graph, and then make it so people can import. So that way you don't have to manually set all this stuff. We can just do an export of all these, and then have just a little script that you can run to import, kind of like DSC. If you use like the Microsoft 365 DSC at all, that's a way that you can export things out of one tenant and import them into another. We would do something similar to that. We probably wouldn't use the same tool set, but we would use something similar that way it's easy to set these, because right now there's a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a ton of things here that you will have to set. This is just the first draft of all that. OneDrive, as I mentioned earlier. I do call out the Edge Password Manager. So with Password Manager, if you've used Edge, and Chrome's probably very similar to this, you might get a lot of nags about your passwords being too weak. And if you have weak passwords, obviously we know that there's security implications for having weak passwords. But if you're dealing with students that have issues typing, they've got accessibility concerns with long and complex passwords, and you've got this password manager that's just nagging you, telling you your password is not secure, or your password is not complex enough, or they're unsafe, then that could just be very annoying. And so I'm just calling out here that these settings are not security best practice. You obviously do want to have safe passwords, longer, complex, passphrases, stuff like that. Like you do want to make sure that your passwords are safe, but there's going to be instances that you have with students where maybe that end user can't use those. And so these settings will actually help disable the password manager, or at least prevent some of those warnings from coming up, telling the user that their passwords are unsafe. News and interests and widgets. This has been a very complicated thing to turn off and to get it so that you don't get error messages when you're turning it off. Because you would think, okay, with news and interests, I should be able, for Windows 10 news and interests, or Windows 11 with widgets. So Windows 11 down here, the bottom left of your screen, widgets, that's what this is. This is all widgets. With Windows 10, it's called news and interests, and it could be in the bottom left. I think now it's like on the right or something with Windows 10. And so the way that I've handled this, so I don't get a bunch of errors when I'm targeting a settings catalog profile to a Windows 10 machine, but that Windows 10 machine, I'm trying to disable widgets with Windows 11, and I'm targeting a Windows 10 machine with that policy. What ends up happening is that I get an error message, and so I end up with a bunch of errors in my settings catalog because I'm turning off widgets for Windows 11, but I'm targeting a Windows 10 machine. And so these policies aren't the same, even though, like, technically speaking, it might seem like widgets and news and interests are the same. I don't know if fundamentally they're actually sharing the same code, but how they're managed is they're managed in two different ways. And so in here, what I'm calling out is using filters to create two different filters, one for Windows 10 devices, one for Windows 11 devices. And then you go through and set the disablement of news and interests, and you target that to your all devices group with a Windows 10, all Windows 10 filter for all of your devices that are running Windows 10. You've got a filter that handles that. And it's the same thing for widgets with Windows 11. If you're using Windows 11, you create a filter for Windows 11, target the all devices group with that Windows 11 filter, and then you disable allow widgets. Unfortunately, if you try to put this all into one settings catalog item, like I said earlier, you're going to get error messages for if you're managing both Windows 10 and Windows 11 platforms. So you'll want to make sure that you're doing this the right way. There's some optional settings here for Teams. So if you're not using Teams, if you're using Google or if you're using something else for learning, and Teams is just something you guys aren't using for either your students or your faculty, staff members, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have Teams installed and then pop up and then give you a bunch of messages and things. Hey, Teams is not up to date, or it just runs on startup. So turn that off. This is the option to do that. Wallpaper, lock screen, that's up to you. Locate device. If you're using Windows, the remote action for locate device for Windows devices, there is a privacy setting that you need to set for let access location. So you'll want to do that. And then for student user settings, so everything that I just mentioned above is a device setting. Now down below, it's user settings. And so as we go through all the different user settings, I'm trying to break this down, and I don't know if I'm going to get this in the right format, but the way I'm doing it right now is like the different personas. So like student user settings is what I'm starting with right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to have like a faculty and staff user setting. Maybe it'll evolve to something like that. But for how I was blocking the apps and preventing students from installing apps, I mentioned earlier that we're using Smart Screen. And so this goes through and describes the different settings that we're using for Smart Screen in the store to allow apps or to requiring the private store only and stuff like that. So all those settings are here. I've also included the recovery environment authentication setting. So basically, if someone tries to get into Windows RE, you need admin authentication to actually run the components in RE. So we're setting some stuff in there as well. But that's just targeted to the student. It's not actually set at the device level. We're also blocking like adding MSA accounts and stuff like that. So like if they try to open up an app that I think it's like Clipchamp, I think that requires like an MSA, which we actually are going to be doing like an enterprise version of Clipchamp. And so you'll be able to use an Azure AD account for that. But if you're trying to use some of these user apps like Clipchamp, it requires you to put an MSA in. And so if they start associating an MSA with a device, then obviously now you start running into some other issues with that. So we obviously want to block those. I mentioned all the BitLocker stuff. So this goes through and sets everything for BitLocker. I mentioned the health monitoring. And then the ESP on the account setup phase. So what you'll notice, well, maybe you wouldn't notice it with an Autopilot self-deploying template, but if you're doing Autopilot user-driven, or if you're doing Autopilot pre-provisioning or white glove, in Autopilot, you've got 3 different phases. You've got the device prep, you've got device setup, and then you have the account setup phase. The account setup phase, for whatever reason, I haven't quite figured it out yet, it seems to take longer than device setup in most cases that I've seen. Not quite sure why that is, but in most cases, you don't necessarily need to wait for account setup to finish, because most times you're not targeting applications to the user, you're targeting applications to the device that are required. You will be targeting applications to the user that are available, so they can go and install them from the company portal. So the only thing that you're targeting to the user might be some settings, but settings generally come down fairly quick. Yet the account setup phase could take like 10, 15 minutes. No idea why it takes that long, but because it's taking that long, that's obviously going to slow down getting into the device. So if you're doing like Autopilot user driven, you give it to the student. Students just kind of sitting there waiting for the device until eventually the account setup phase finishes. So in general, we disable that because, again, policy settings generally come down fairly quick after the user signs in, that there's typically not, there could be a very brief moment where they can do things before the policies that are applied to them aren't on. And so if you are really concerned about that, then don't set this. You can just wait and then let the ESP handle it. But if it is taking an incredibly long amount of time and you just can't wait that much time, I'm going to bug here and fix this. If you can't wait that much time, then go ahead and turn it off. And then lastly, student user settings. So for user settings for the students, we're setting a custom policy here to block CMD, PowerShell, regedit, and registry. So if you do, or CMD, PowerShell, regedit, and reg, so they won't be able to run any of those tools as well. So we're blocking that, and that's all done through a custom policy. And then there's an XML file that you can click here, and this is the app blocker policy that you would use. And so you just follow these steps here, and that'll block the command prompt and all that other stuff from running. So like if we go back to this VM here, this is pretty much the same VM that I used to cut the video that I showed earlier. But if you try to run CMD, this tells you it's blocked. I do the same thing with PowerShell. PowerShell is blocked. And so if there's other EXEs that you want to block, you can do that too. But installing apps, kind of showed this earlier, but if you go to downloads, I've downloaded pretty much all the common things, try to run Firefox, you're kind of blocked from that too. So all this stuff, all this stuff's blocked. But again, there's more things that we can add. I know there's a ton. I didn't talk about Windows updates. We kind of run out of time here. I've got 6 minutes. We don't have Windows updates documented yet. I will document this. This seems to be a conversation I have at least once a month with a customer, and we go really deep into Windows update. But we will get the update rings documented. That's going to be coming. Let me think here. Yeah, so just these general settings. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this. But these are basically the settings that I generally will recommend to customers. Just trying to think here if there's anything that I modified. I don't think there's anything I modified here. So these generally will work mostly in most K-12 scenarios, but we'll have to explain what each of these settings does, or at least, especially like the reset to default. There's a long explanation about what that's doing. So we'll need to get that documented out. But that's Windows updates. Feature updates. I know school's about to start. If you're wondering how to get to Windows like 11.22 H2, this is the way to do it. But we do need more time to really discuss how this feature update delivery behavior ties into update rings, and we just don't have the time to do that right now. Quality updates, driver updates. We'll need to have a separate session on driver updates. This literally came out probably about a month ago. And so we'll need to talk more about that. I like to get the reporting figured out first. That way we can have a good end-to-end conversation about that. And with that, I know we're about 4 minutes in, or 4 minutes left. So what questions do we have, Garrett? Are you on mute?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. So the only question is there a way to get the signed in user like you can in i4E, or the last signed in user like you can in i4E in the main Intune console?
Nope. Can't do it.
Can't do it. Yeah.
Can't do it. Nope, that's
good
it.
feedback though. We've been asking for it.
I've asked for it for years. Still haven't got it yet. So they don't listen to me. But if you go to Intune for Education, you all have access to this, even higher ed, academic med, you guys all have access to this. Go to intuneeducation.portal.azure.com, go to device inventory, and then last signed in user. And it tells you right there, it tells you the last check-in. And so you can use that, find out who had the device. And so you'll notice here I've got like my student account here enrolled this VM, but the last signed in user was my admin account. So you won't see this in the full Intune console. This is the only place that we expose it, but it's all in the graph. Like there's no reason they couldn't include it. They just have other priorities right now. So that's it. All right, what else? Anything else? Oh, not that one. This one. Keith had a question. I'm referencing the guidance that came out last month. What is this? Oh, provisioning package is not working. This was an issue. This was an issue in October. PBKGs were broken straight out of the box with Windows 11 22 H2 RTM. That was fixed December CU, I think. So this shouldn't be a problem anymore. If now you might be buying devices though that ship with Windows 11 22 H2 RTM, and if that's the case, then you will have broken provisioning packages. So that's expected. Please allow us to block students from uploading BitLocker keys for Azure registered devices. There is a setting to block that. I haven't tested it though. As I was going through all of this, I did see the setting in there to prevent the upload of the keys, but I'm not sure on if it's a personal device, if that is solved. That's something we'd still have to test.
I'll test it. What's the setting?
What's the setting? I'll test it. I got to find it. I'll post it to the chat after the call. Let's see, resolved issues.
I think we've gotten most of the issues or questions answered.
Cool.
Yeah, I think you're good.
All right.
But I know it is 4:30, at least my time. It's 5:30 on the East Coast. So let's go ahead and wrap up. But Richard, thanks so much for all of the hard work. I know how hard you've been working on this, and I think this is awesome. Throw an applause or a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's session of kind of best practices, because I know I did. I think this is going to be really, really helpful moving forward. And then hopefully we can keep up a regular cadence of kind of, any changes that we make to this. We can keep this posted, and we want to learn from you. So I think kind of crowdsourcing this, y'all are our best knowledge vehicles, right? Y'all are in the trenches every single day. Y'all know what works, y'all know what doesn't. So be sure to comment and let us know what else you would recommend or what you like to see. And in some cases, I think we might even have some like noteworthy or other notable settings that you may want to set. I think lately with all this AI stuff, we've had some customers asking like, how do we turn off the Bing chat specifically? And so there are some things that you may want to do, but you may not want to do. So all of these are to be used at your discretion. So again, Richard, thanks so much for sharing this. It looks like it was a great session. Everyone enjoyed it. So that concludes today's inaugural session, back to school for EDU Endpoint Office Hours. Again, apologies for the calendar invite issues. We did post the link in the chat to the team announcement that has the ICS file attached to it. So if you haven't done so yet, go to that link, get that ICS attached to your calendar. If you're still having issues, let me know and we'll get you sorted out. But thank you all so much for joining, and we will see you in 2 weeks where Carlos will join us and we'll kind of go through the new updates with the Windows Store for Business, or Store for Education, I should say.
See you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Have a great
Thanks.
day.
Take care.
Bye.